The strange noise in the forest. It was a quiet evening, and the sky was turning dark as Eli walked slowly along the narrow forest path behind his old wooden house. The air was cold, and the wind was moving through the trees, making a soft whispering sound that made him feel uneasy. He had lived near this forest for 10 years, and he thought he knew every tree, every sound, and every corner of it. But tonight something felt different. Something felt wrong. He was carrying a small lantern in one hand and a hot cup of tea in the other. He usually came here to find peace and silence after a long day, but today there was no peace in the air, only silence. And then suddenly he heard it, a soft crying sound not far away. It was not human, not an animal. Either it sounded weak and scared, like someone was in pain. Eli stopped walking and listened carefully. His heart was beating faster, and he looked around, but saw nothing. He put down his tea on a rock and slowly followed the sound through the bushes. The crying grew louder, and he could now hear something else, like a low humming noise, like a machine trying to start, but failing again and again. He reached a small open area, and there it was, hidden behind a pile of leaves and branches, a small, crashed spaceship. Its surface was burnt and glowing faintly with strange blue lights. It looked like something from a science fiction movie, but it was real. It was right in front of him. Eli stepped closer, his breath caught in his chest. He had never seen anything like this before. The crying was coming from inside the ship. He touched the cold metal, and the door opened with a soft hiss. The inside was dark and smoky. He could see shadows moving inside, and then he saw her, a strange figure lying on the floor, holding something close to her chest. It was a female creature, not human. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes large and shining like stars. Her arms were wrapped around 3 small shapes, tiny creatures with big black eyes and soft glowing skin. They looked like babies. They were crying softly and holding onto her tightly. She was hurt, bleeding from her side, and her breathing was slow and shallow. Eli wanted to run. He wanted to scream, but he could not move. His eyes were locked on the scene in front of him. The alien woman looked at him with fear and pain, but also with hope. She tried to speak, but only a soft whisper came out. Her hand reached towards him, shaking. He knelt down slowly and put his hand over hers. He whispered softly, "It is okay, I am not going to hurt you." She looked at him with wide eyes and blinked slowly. One of the babies looked at Eli and stopped crying for a moment. Then it reached out its tiny glowing hand and touched Eli's finger. It felt warm and soft, like a little spark of light, and suddenly Eli felt something he could not explain, like a quiet voice inside his head telling him to help them, to protect them. He gently lifted the alien mother in his arms. She was lighter than she looked, and the babies clung to her. Eli looked around and saw broken parts of the ship, wires glowing with energy, and a strange black box that was blinking with a red light. He had no idea what any of it meant, but he knew he could not leave them here, not in the cold forest, not while they were hurt and scared. He carried them carefully back to his house. The path felt longer than usual, the trees darker and the shadows deeper, as if the forest itself was watching him. When he reached his backyard, he opened the basement door and went inside. The room was small and dusty, filled with old books, tools, and boxes. He placed the alien mother on a soft mattress and wrapped her in a blanket. The babies curled up beside her, their glowing eyes slowly closing. Eli sat down on the floor, his hands shaking, his mind full of questions. What had he just found? Who were they? Where did they come from? And why were they here? But before he could think more, he heard something outside, a soft buzzing sound like a drone or a machine scanning the area. He peeked through the window and saw a red light moving slowly across the trees. Someone or something was out there, searching the forest, searching for the crashed ship, maybe searching for her. Eli's heart raced. He turned off the lights and sat quietly in the dark. The alien mother opened her eyes and whispered something in a strange language. She pointed at her babies, then at Eli, and then placed her hand on her heart, as if saying, "Please protect them." Eli nodded, slowly, his fear turning into something stronger, a promise. And then he heard a soft beep from the strange black box in the wreckage. It was still inside the forest, and it had started blinking faster and faster, as if sending a message to the sky. Something or someone had received the signal. And they were coming. Eli stood in the darkness of his basement, his heart beating like a drum, while the strange glowing babies slept beside their injured mother. Her breathing was weak, her skin pale and glowing faintly under the dim yellow light, and outside the red scanning light continued to float slowly past his window like a hungry eye, searching for something to catch and destroy. He moved carefully through the shadows, checking every window, every corner, every sound. The black box from the ship was still blinking and humming softly, and he did not know what it meant, but he knew one thing: they were not safe. Not yet, maybe not ever. The alien mother opened her eyes, slowly, her head turning toward the small bundle of light beside her. Her fingers reached out gently and touched one of the babies. The child made a soft sound in its sleep, and she smiled weakly. Then her gaze shifted to Eli, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, two beings from two different worlds, sitting in the same quiet space, under the same fear and the same stars. Eli knelt beside her and offered a small bowl of warm soup he had made. She looked at it curiously, her hands trembling as she tried to hold the spoon. But her strength was fading. Eli helped her, and she accepted his kindness with tired, grateful eyes. She whispered a word in her language, and though he did not understand it, he felt it in his chest like a soft thank you carved into the air. He pointed at himself and said, Eli then pointed at her and waited. She hesitated, then placed her hand on her chest and said, Nira. Her voice was soft like wind through leaves, her name strange and beautiful, like a forgotten song. Nira then reached to the side and pulled out a small device from a pouch. It looked like a crystal attached to wires and lights. When she pressed it, a blue hologram appeared between them, spinning slowly in the air, showing a peaceful planet filled with tall blue trees and silver oceans. Flying creatures danced in the sky, and children laughed in fields of glowing flowers. Then the image changed. The sky turned red, ships appeared, fire spread across the land. Nira was running, holding the babies. The sound of weapons filled the air. Her partner stayed behind, fighting something dark and shadowy and monstrous. She escaped through a portal, while behind her the planet burned. Eli watched silently, feeling something heavy in his heart. Nira pressed her hand against the hologram, and it faded away. Her eyes filled with tears, not of water, but of shimmering silver light. They rolled down her face and vanished into the air like stardust. Babies stirred in their sleep, and one of them woke up, stretching its small glowing arms toward Eli. He smiled and picked it up gently. It looked at him with big, curious eyes, and then placed its hand on his cheek. A warm feeling passed through him, a strange comfort, like he had known this little being forever, like they were family now. Somehow, in a way no words could explain, Eli wrapped them in old blankets and sat beside them, holding the baby close, while Nira watched with soft eyes, her pain still strong, but her heart calmer now, knowing they had found someone good, someone kind outside. The red light vanished, but the silence was heavier than before. Something was still out there, watching, listening, waiting. Then the doorbell rang once, then again, louder each time. Eli froze, his hands tight around the baby. He looked at Nira. She nodded, once her eyes telling him to be careful, to be smart. He walked upstairs slowly, each step louder than thunder in his ears. He reached the door and peeked through the peephole. Two men stood outside in dark uniforms, with strange devices on their belts and serious expressions. One of them was holding a scanner, and it was beeping. Eli opened the door halfway, his voice calm as he asked if something was wrong. The taller man said they had tracked a strange object falling from the sky, and their equipment showed it landed near this area. They were checking every house for any signs of unusual activity or materials. Eli shook his head and said he had not seen anything, just heard thunder and saw smoke in the distance. The man asked to look around, but Eli said his dog was sick and did not like strangers. They waited a moment, then handed him a small card and walked away, but the shorter one left a small round device near the fence, something that blinked once and then stopped. Eli closed the door, locked it, and ran back to the basement. Nira was sitting up now, her face pale, but her eyes alert. He told her what happened, and she looked at the ceiling, then pointed upward, her hand forming a shape in the air, a circle with waves around it. Maybe The tracker may be danger. That night Eli could not sleep. He sat near the babies, who now looked peaceful and calm, as if they knew he would protect them, as if they trusted him like their own. Bladnira reached out and placed her hand on Eli's hand. Her touch gentle and warm, and in her language she said something that needed no translation, because in that one quiet moment, with the hum of alien machines and the breath of strange children in the air, Eli understood she was not a monster. She was a mother, and her heart was the same as his. The night was quiet, too quiet for Eli to feel calm. The wind outside was not moving, and even the trees stood still, like they were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen, waiting for something to arrive. Eli sat beside the alien mother, Nira, who was now sleeping deeply, her wounds slowly healing, her skin glowing a little brighter than before. The three alien babies curled close to her, their small bodies giving off soft pulses of blue light, like stars in a gentle rhythm that made the basement look almost magical, almost safe. But Eli knew safety was only a dream he could not trust. Round device the soldiers left outside still blinked. Once every few seconds it looked dead, but Eli felt like it was watching, like it was listening. Like something or someone on the other side was waiting for a signal, waiting for a reason to return. He had taken the strange black box from the crash site and hidden it under a wooden crate. Its lights were still pulsing faster than before, like it was trying to warn them, or maybe trying to call someone. Eli did not know which was worse. Checked every window again, moved quietly through each room, and placed heavy furniture against doors just in case, his hands shaking, but steady, his thoughts racing but focused. In the darkness above the trees, something moved, a shape quick and silent, almost invisible, but not completely. The stars above flickered as the object passed in front of them for only a second, and then vanished again into the black sky. The baby named Luma, the smallest of the three, opened her eyes and cried softly, like she could feel something wrong, something dangerous, getting close. Eli picked her up, held her close, and whispered that everything would be all right, though he was not sure if that was true. Then the basement light flickered once, twice, and then died. The room filled with shadows. The hum of the machines around them stopped for a breath, then returned weaker, and Eli heard a noise, a soft clicking sound, like claws against metal, like teeth grinding slowly together, like something trying to enter without being seen. He grabbed the old flashlight from the shelf, turned it on, and pointed it at the far wall where the sound was loudest. The beam landed on a small metallic object stuck to the bricks, a spider-shaped device glowing red and crawling downward slowly like a parasite. Eli rushed forward and smashed it with a hammer. The pieces shattered across the floor, but as they broke apart, a sharp pulse shot through the air, and the black box under the crate blinked 3 times quickly and then turned dark. Nira sat up suddenly, her eyes wide with fear. She said a word again, and again, something urgent. Eli tried to understand. Her hands were moving fast, pointing upward, then toward the door, then at the babies. She was saying they had been found. She was saying they were coming. A loud crack echoed through the forest outside, like lightning without thunder, like air tearing open, and something heavy dropping from the sky. Eli ran to the window and saw them, 3 figures dressed in black armor with red eyes, glowing like fire, stepping through the trees slowly and without sound, like ghosts. Made of steel, they carried weapons unlike anything Eli had seen, long and sharp, humming with energy. One of them stopped and scanned the area, its eyes locking onto the house, its head tilting slowly, like it was smiling without a mouth. Eli ran back down to the basement and grabbed Nira's arm. She stood weak but ready, holding one of her babies, while Eli picked up the other 2, their lights brightening in his arms, like they could feel his fear and wanted to protect him instead. Led them through the hidden trapdoor behind the old shelves, a narrow tunnel he had dug years ago that led into the deep woods behind his house. It was tight and dark, but safe for now, the walls shaking slightly as footsteps above shook the wooden floors. They moved fast through the tunnel, every step louder than the last, every breath harder to take. Nira behind him, breathing heavy, the babies quiet and alert. As they reached the end of the tunnel, Eli pushed open the hatch and stepped into the cold forest. moonlight shining through the branches above. The air felt sharp like knives, like the night itself wanted to stop them. He helped Nira climb out and looked back. One last time toward the house, a soft glow now coming from the windows, and then a flash of red light lit up the sky as something exploded where the basement had been. Nira cried out and dropped to her knees, holding the baby tighter, her voice filled with pain but also with rage, her eyes glowing now with bright silver light. And Eli saw for the first time what she really was. Not just a mother, not just an alien, but something powerful, something ancient, something made to protect. Eli placed his hand on her shoulder, and she looked at him with tears and strength mixed into one. He nodded slowly and whispered something soft. Not a word, but a feeling, and together they turned and vanished into the forest deeper and deeper. Behind them the hunters scanned the smoke, their weapons humming, their eyes locked forward, like machines with only one purpose: to destroy, to hunt, to take. But this time their prey was ready, and the fight had only just begun. The forest was still dark and cold as Ele walked slowly through the trees, holding the glowing babies close to his chest, while Nira followed behind him, weak but steady, her arms wrapped tightly around the smallest child, whose light flickered softly like a candle in the wind. They had escaped the hunters, but Ele knew they were not far. He knew their red eyes were still searching the sky and the ground and every shadow that moved in the night. But for now the trees gave them shelter, the forest gave them silence, the wind gave them cover. After an hour of walking, Eli found a small cave near the edge of a rocky hill, hidden behind hanging vines and surrounded by thick moss. It looked abandoned, quiet, perfect for hiding. He helped Nira inside, then laid the babies down on a dry patch of earth, their tiny hands reaching out to each other as if needing the warmth of one another to stay strong, to stay alive. Nira sat down slowly, her eyes tired, her skin dull and pale. Eli looked at her and saw the pain behind her strength, the sorrow behind her silence, and he felt something inside him. Something growing, something heavy and warm. Not fear, not confusion, not even curiosity, just care, just a feeling that she and the children were now part of his life, no matter what happened, no matter what they were. He lit a small fire near the entrance, using dry wood and leaves, while the babies made soft sounds like singing, like whispering stars. He cooked a little food and shared some water with Nira, who accepted it with a weak smile, her hand trembling slightly as she brought the bottle to her lips. Then, slowly she reached into a pouch and took out a smooth, round crystal glowing faintly blue. She held it toward Eli and motioned for him to place his hand on it. He hesitated, then touched it, and in that moment, something strange happened, something deep. A wave of warmth passed through him, and suddenly he could feel her thoughts, not as words, but as feelings, as images, as pure emotion. He saw her home, a world of silver skies and gentle winds, tall trees glowing from within, and peaceful cities where music floated in the air like perfume. He saw her joy when the babies were born, how they glowed brighter than any other child in her world, how the elders said they were special, chosen, how she and her partner had named them Luma, Zin, and Bio, each name filled with hope, each light a gift. Then he saw the attack, the burning skies, the screams, the shadows falling from the stars, the soldiers hunting without mercy, the last flight through a portal, the crash, the pain, the fear, the loneliness. And then the moment she saw Eli standing over her, hand reaching out, not to hurt, but to help. Eli pulled his hand away, his eyes wide, his breath short, but his heart calm. He looked at Nira and understood she had lost everything, and still she fought for her children, still she protected them, still she trusted him. He picked up Zin, who had started to cry, and gently rocked him in his arms, singing a quiet tune from his childhood, something his mother used to sing under the stars when he was afraid. The baby calmed down, his light steady, his eyes slowly closing. Nira watched, and something shifted in her face, a softness, a calm. Her hand moved, and she touched Eli's arm gently and nodded once, like saying thank you, like saying, I see who are. Over the next few days they stayed hidden in the Cave Eli went out during the early morning to find berries and clean water, always careful, always quiet sometimes. He saw strange lights moving above the trees, or heard the hum of machines passing overhead, but they were never found, not yet inside. The cave, a new life began to grow. The babies laughed more, their little hands reaching out for Eli. Every time he came close, they played with his hair, with his shirt, with his old necklace, made of wood and stone, and every time they touched him, he felt lighter, stronger, like they were giving back the care he gave them, like they were healing each other without knowing it. Nira began to smile more, her strength returning slowly, her voice growing clearer. She tried to speak his name sometimes, and he tried to speak hers, and even though the sounds were never perfect, the meaning was always there, the connection deeper than words. One evening, while the sky turned orange and the stars began to show, Nira handed Eli a small bracelet made of threads and glowing beads. He looked at it confused, but she placed it on his wrist and pointed at her own, showing the same kind of bracelet, and then pointed at the babies, each wearing one around their tiny arms. He looked at her, and she nodded again and touched her heart, then his, then the babies, and Eli understood he was one of them, now not by blood, not by birth, but by bond, by promise, by choice. He smiled softly and held the bracelet close and whispered their names one by one, Luma, Zin, Bo, and then looked at Nira and said, "We are family now." And the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, as if agreeing, as if blessing the bond between a human and the light of another world. Asterisk. The forest was sleeping under a sky full of silent stars, while Eli sat near the fire holding Bo close to his chest as the baby slept peacefully, glowing faintly with every breath. Nira lay nearby resting, with Luma and Zin wrapped in a soft cloth made from Eli's old jacket, their warmth shared like a small family held together by hope and fear. The bracelet on Eli's wrist shimmered softly in the firelight, a sign of the bond he had chosen, a promise he had made, a truth he had accepted. It had been 2 days since they left the basement, 2 days since the hunters arrived, 2 days of hiding, of silence, of waiting for the next shadow to fall. Eli had started to believe they were safe, at least for now, until the sound came. It was faint at first, like a breeze brushing leaves, like the rustling of something small and harmless, but then it grew louder, deeper, sharper, like metal cutting air, like boots crushing moss, like something not human walking through the dark. He stood quickly and placed Bo next to Nira, his eyes searching the trees, his hands reaching for the wooden staff he had sharpened at both ends, not strong enough to fight machines, but maybe strong enough to buy time. Nira woke, sensing the change, her eyes alert, her breath quiet. She held her children close and whispered a word Eli did not know, but he felt its meaning: stay close, stay quiet, stay ready. Fire died slowly, and the cave grew darker as the sound of movement surrounded them. Shadows moved between the trees, not just one, not just two, but many, slow and silent, with red lights pulsing on their bodies and masks that glowed like blood under moonlight. Eli helped Nira stand and led them through the narrow back path, a trail covered by ferns and rocks leading away from the cave, deeper into the heart of the forest, where even the stars could not reach. They ran through the trees, the babies pressed close against their mother, their small lights covered with cloth to hide their glow, and Eli behind them, watching every branch, every root, every shadow that flickered too quickly. Then it happened, a sharp sound, a cry, not from the children, not from Nira, but from Zin. Eli turned and saw nothing. Zin was gone. Nira screamed without sound, her mouth open, her arms reaching, her eyes wide with horror. Eli ran back and found only footprints, not human, not alien, something else, and then a deep growl from the trees, like a machine trying to breathe, like anger trying to speak. He followed the sound through thick vines and thorns, his legs cut, his hands bleeding, until he reached a clearing lit by red beams floating in the air. In the center stood a tall creature, not like the soldiers, not like Nira, something older, something wild, with armor made of bone and metal, holding Zin in one arm like a trophy, like a prize. Eli stepped forward, slowly raising his staff, his voice shaking but strong, telling the creature to let the child go, telling it that Zin was not a weapon, not a thing, not a target, The creature growled and turned its head, its eyes black as ash, its body covered in strange marks glowing softly with colors Eli could not name. Then without warning it raised its arm and fired a bolt of energy toward Eli, who barely dodged, falling hard against a rock, his staff flying from his hands. Cried out, and the sound was not fear but power. The small baby reached toward Eli, and from his tiny hand a pulse of light exploded, sending the creature stumbling backward. Eli grabbed his staff and charged, swinging with all his strength, hitting the creature in the leg, then the shoulder, then knocking Zin free from its grip. He caught the baby and ran through the trees back to Nira, whose eyes filled with tears of relief as she took Zin into her arms and kissed his glowing face again and again. They did not speak, they just held each other tighter than ever, knowing how close they had come to losing more than life, more than safety. The creature did not follow, but its scream echoed through the woods, long and broken, like a promise of return, like a name being cursed into the stars. Night. Nira sat beside Eli and placed her hand on his chest, feeling the beat of his heart, her eyes soft with gratitude, with respect, with something deeper. She reached into her pouch and pulled out a small glowing stone, then placed it in his hand, her fingers closing as around it. Slowly, gently, Eli looked at her confused, and she smiled faintly, then pointed at the children, then at the stars, then at him. He understood this was more than thanks. This was trust. This was a piece of her world being given to him, not as a gift, but as a sign of belonging. They sat in silence as the wind moved through the trees, and the babies slept safely between them, their lights soft and warm like a tiny galaxy held together by love. But far above in the black sky, a ship moved slowly, scanning the forest below its sensors, searching for the signal that had once blinked and vanished. The hunters were not finished. They were only waiting, and the next time they came, they would not come alone. The wind was strong and cold as morning light began to break through the trees, shining down on the leaves that still held the night's silence like a secret. Eli stood near the stream, washing blood from his hands, the cut on his arm burning as the cold water rushed past, like time, like memory, like something he could never hold behind him. The cave was quiet. Nira and the babies asleep after a night filled with fear and running and near loss. Zin safe, now breathing softly, curled between his siblings, their tiny bodies warm with life and trust, their light pulsing slow like a peaceful song. Eli looked at the bracelet on his wrist, the threads dirty, the beads cracked, but still glowing, still alive, still binding him to them, still telling him this was real, this was family. He returned to the cave and sat beside Nira, who opened her eyes slowly, her hand reaching for his, her fingers weak, her skin pale, her breathing not steady. Something was wrong. She tried to speak, but her voice was faint, her words broken, like pieces of glass on stone. She pointed at her chest, then at the babies, then at Eli, then back at her chest, her eyes full of something more than pain, something more than fear. Eli leaned close and listened, trying to understand as she spoke her native words, barely rising from her lips, a whisper of a mother's last prayer. Then she pulled the glowing stone from her pouch, the one she had given him, and held it against his heart, her hand trembling, her light flickering, her face pale like moonlight behind clouds. Stone began to glow brighter, warmer, stronger, and Nira whispered something with her final strength, her voice like wind in the trees, soft and fading. Eli felt the warmth rush through him, his chest heavy, his breath caught, as if the stone was not just a gift, but a transfer, a bond, a final decision from a dying mother to the only one she could trust. The babies stirred as if they felt the moment, as if they knew something sacred was passing between worlds, between souls. Then Nira's hand slipped away, falling gently beside her as her eyes closed and her light dimmed her breath, slowing her body still like a fallen leaf resting on the earth. Eli did not cry, not at first. He simply held her hand as the stream of light from the stone faded into his chest, and the silence grew heavier around him. Then Luma crawled into his lap and placed her tiny hand on his cheek and said one word, not in Nira's language and not in his own, but in something new, something shared, something made between Them day Eli looked at her eyes full of stars, full of innocence and wonder and need. And he felt the tears rise like a flood, like the sky falling gently down into his chest. Zin and Bio followed, reaching for him, holding his arms, his neck, their soft voices calling him the same word again and again, with warmth, with joy, with trust. He held them close one by one, then all together, and looked at Nira for the last time, her face calm, her body resting, her mission complete. She had crossed galaxies to save them, and in the end she had chosen Eli, not because he was strong, not because he was smart, but because he cared, because he stayed, because he did not run later. Eli buried her near the roots of a tall glowing tree, whose light danced like stars across the leaves. The babies placed small stones around the earth there, hands guided by love, their eyes quiet with sorrow. He marked the place with her bracelet tied to a branch, its beads still glowing, its threads still strong. Then he sat with them under the tree, his arms around their tiny shoulders, his voice soft as he told them a story about the stars, about their mother, about how brave she was, how kind, how much she loved them, and how she gave everything to keep them safe. Days passed and Eli changed. He no longer feared the machines or the hunters or the dark sky above. He trained himself to move faster, to hear better, to protect stronger. He used parts from the crash and built alarms and traps around the forest. He carved new paths through the trees and created new places to hide and defend. The children grew fast, their powers blooming like flowers after rain. Luma could lift small stones with her mind. Zin could bend light and make himself vanish. And Bio could sense danger before it arrived. They laughed more and cried less. They spoke to Eli in a mix of sounds and signs and light, and he understood every word, every need, every fear. He cooked for them, he sang to them, he healed their wounds, and kissed their heads good night every night as they whispered da-da before sleep. He was no longer alone. He was no longer a man hiding in the woods. He was now a father of three, but above the clouds, beyond the stars, the signal from the black box still moved through the void, calling out across galaxies, calling something bigger, something darker, something final. And it was coming. The wind roared through the trees as thunder rolled across the sky, shaking the forest with the sound of something ancient, something huge, something coming. For them, Eli stood at the edge of the clearing, holding Bio in his arms, while Luma and Zin stayed close behind, their eyes wide, their lights dim. Nira's bracelet tied to Eli's wrist, glowing brighter than ever, pulsing like a warning, like a call, like a heartbeat. They had prepared for this moment for days. Eli had set traps around the forest using alien parts and old tools, and sharp branches wired with sensors, and stones soaked in river water, mixed with chemicals that made a bright flash when touched by heat. He had built walls of logs, hidden paths, and small hiding holes, big enough for 1 or 2 small children. But none of them were for running, none of them were for escape. This was the place he chose to fight. This was the place he chose to stand. He looked at the sky now, covered with black clouds, swirling like smoke, like a portal was opening above them, and through it came a ship larger than any before, its body shaped like a dagger, its lights red and cold, its voice a low hum that made the trees tremble and the earth shiver beneath their feet. Children held onto Eli's legs, their tiny fingers digging into his clothes, as if to say, stay with us, as if to say, we believe in you, as if to say, we are not afraid because you are here. Eli placed Bio in the hidden nest of roots near the tall glowing tree, then knelt down to Luma and Zin and pointed to the same place, his eyes serious, his hands firm. He kissed their foreheads and whispered the word family, and they nodded without a sound, crawling into the space where the branches formed a wall of light and leaves where they would be safe. Turned and faced the sky as the ship opened its doors, and the hunters came down, not just 3, not 10, but a dozen machines, covered in armor with red eyes and long weapons with sharp claws, and voices that spoke without feeling, without mercy. They moved in silence through the trees, scanning every leaf, every breath, every heartbeat, and Eli stood in the center of the field, his hands empty, his face calm. They stopped a few feet from him, and the leader stepped forward, its voice crackling. Like fire across glass, its words asking where are the children. Eli did not answer. Leader raised its arm and fired a beam of energy that hit the ground near Eli's feet, sending a wave of heat across the field, burning grass and soil and memory. Eli stepped back, then pressed a button on the small device he had built using Nira's tech, and the ground exploded behind him, smoke and fire rising into the air as two hunters fell trapped in nets made of light that wrapped around them like webs from another world. The others moved fast, but Eli was faster, running through the trees, leading them away from the children, setting off trap after trap, making the forest light up with fire and sound and confusion. One by one the hunters fell, some burned, some crushed, some caught in vines that screamed as they wrapped tighter around metal limbs. But the leader kept coming. It moved with purpose, with rage, with something personal, as if it knew Eli, as if it hated him for choosing to care, for choosing to love, for choosing to become more than a man hiding in the woods. Eli reached the edge of the cliff where the river roared below and turned to face the leader, who now stood alone. Its armor burned, its mask cracked, its eyes glowing brighter than ever. They fought without words, without mercy, Eli using every bit of strength, every memory, every promise. Nira made every smile. The children gave every reason to keep standing. The leader struck him hard, throwing him against a tree, breaking the device in his pocket, tearing the bracelet from his wrist. Eli fell to his knees, blood on his face, light fading from his eyes, and the leader raised its arm to end him. Then came the light. 3 streams of glowing energy shot through the trees, hitting the leader with force that cracked the sky. Luma, Zin, and Bo standing together, their eyes shining, their hands raised, their voices. When the leader screamed and fell backward into the river, below, its body swallowed by the current, its red lights vanishing into the deep. Eli opened his eyes and saw them, saw his children standing in the wind, their lights brighter than the stars above, and he smiled the way only a father can smile when everything else is gone, but love remains. They ran to him, held him, cried with him, their hands healing his wounds, their light warming his skin. Together they walked back to the glowing tree and sat in its shade, the sky clear now, the stars returning. One by one, like a promise kept, Eli looked at them and whispered, "You are safe," and they said, "Down," and again until sleep took them gently above them. The sky held no ships, no hunters, no war, only peace, only light, only home. And in that forest, under that tree, in that quiet space, a man became a father, and a story became a legend.